the session tonight doing an overview of the grief and loss process. And then I'll be getting more specific in the next 2 weeks. So basically, I'm going to begin by doing a reading from the language of letting go. And I picked a reading, by the way, just to let you know, November 1st through November 5th, in the language of letting go, there are some pretty fantastic readings on grief, if you want to check them out. I picked the one from November 2nd. The grief process. To let ourselves fully grieve our losses is how we surrender to the process of life and recovery. Some experts, like Patrick Carnes, call the 12 steps a program for dealing with our losses, a program for dealing with grief. How do we grieve? Awkwardly, imperfectly, usually with a great deal of resistance, often with anger and attempts to negotiate, ultimately by surrendering to the pain. The grief process, says Kubler-Ross, is a 5-stage process: denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and finally acceptance. That's how we grieve. That's how we accept. That's how we forgive. That's how we respond to the many changes life throws our way. Although this 5-step process looks tidy on paper, it is not tidy in life. Do not move through it in a series of compartments. We usually flounder through kicking and screaming, about back and forth movement, to reach that peaceful state called acceptance. We can learn to understand the grief process and how it applies to recovery. Even good changes in recovery can bring loss and consequently grief. We can learn to help ourselves and others by understanding and becoming familiar with this process. We learn to fully grieve our losses, feel our pain, accept and forgive, so we can feel joy and love. Today, God, help me open myself to the process of grieving my losses. Allow me to flow through the grief process, accepting all the stages that achieve peace and acceptance in my life. Help me learn to be gentle with myself and others while we go through this very human process of grieving. I wanted to share that with you tonight because as we get into this series on grief, I want to emphasize a couple of things. The grieving process is the ultimate process of life. Whenever we experience change, we experience newness and different things in our life. The concept of letting go, we experience losses. We go through the grieving process. When Kubler-Ross wrote that book on death and dying, she presented the grief process as a process for dealing with primarily death. Little did she know that eventually that process would be used by all of us in so many different ways in all different areas of our life. It almost reminds me in a way of the early founders of AA. When they put the program together, they were doing it primarily for alcohol, and now it's mushroomed into all different areas of life. So we look at the grief process fundamentally as the process every of us go through in our daily, everyday life. And it's a struggle. It's not easy. And yet we've got to go through it because change is part of life. Our problem is we try to control everything and we operate on fear and control. And when you try to control life, life doesn't work. Sorry. The more you try to control it, the more you make it crazy and insane. And we keep looking for ways or for magic. And there is no magic in life. Life is just a process. And you heard me say this 400,000 times. You have to trust the process works. The problem is, so many of us don't realize it. We try to control the process. And so in grieving, we go through these 5 stages. We go through them physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially. Everything in life is always in constant process of change. Every time you experience a new change, you go through the grieving process. Addicts know what I'm talking about. But some of the addicts are so used to their addiction. Addiction is normal to them. But then once they put the addiction down and they start the process of recovery, it scares the hell out of them. Because now I have to start all over again. and develop a whole new concept of myself as a person. We call that spirituality. And that's scary. That's why Patrick Carnes said the 12 steps are a formula for grieving. We grieve the old, create the new. So it's part of the process. So tonight I want to use an analogy to bring this out to you and take the analogy from scripture. And the analogy goes like this. There was a man that went out to sow some seed. Some of the seed fell on rock. Some of the seed fell on shallow, sandy soil. Some of the seed fell amongst weeds and thorns. And some of the seed fell on good ground. The seed that fell on the rock, could not grow because it had no place to grow into, no roots. And eventually the birds ate it up or it blew away. The seed that fell on the shallow, sandy soil started to grow. The first cloud burst that came along drowned it. The seed that fell amongst the weeds and thorns started to grow, but it got choked out by the weeds and thorns. The seed that fell on the good ground started to grow, but it grew inside. It grew strong. And from the strong, something beautiful came on the outside. And that's exactly what the grief process is. See, too many times, we as human beings keep looking for the externals. We keep looking for what's on the outside. We don't realize the fact that the real process of growth is internal. And from the internal comes the beauty on the outside. And that's why it's so important to understand how this process works. The first stage of grieving, and this goes into all areas of life, is denial. Now, I really believe denial gets a bad rap. I'm sorry. I truly believe that denial is something necessary, it's part of life, and many of us stay in denial until we are ready. Give you an example of this. When I was a young priest, I was stationed in a parish in Vineland, New Jersey. I was only about 27 years old. It was my second year of being ordained. And this gentleman, a contractor from our parish, came home from work one day early. As he opened the front door, he witnessed his son committing suicide. He actually saw the whole thing happen. His wife came home 2 hours later, walked in, and her son was dead on the living room floor. The husband was in the kitchen eating a bowl of soup. And as far as he was concerned, nothing happened. When he saw that trauma, it was so powerful and so beautiful and scary that it froze him. That's what trauma does. It froze him solid. He could not handle it, could not deal with it. He went into a total state of denial because he wasn't ready to look at it. He went through the funeral, went through everything, and functioned very well. And people couldn't understand why he wasn't upset. He wasn't ready. See, in his mind, all this wasn't real. It's like he was in another world. Psychiatrists, psychologists, they took him everywhere, and they said the same thing to the family. Leave him alone, give him time. Everything happens in time. 4.5 months later, sitting in the living room watching TV, the same TV in which his son had committed suicide 4.5 months ago, all of a sudden, he starts screaming, yelling, throwing things around, breaking things, went off the deep end. His anger level just came flying out of him. All of a sudden, he had to face what he had to face and deal with it. I use that as an example because that's exactly how we go through the journey of life. Every time we have to face something we don't want to face, the easiest thing is to block it and deny it. And many of us do become frozen. And many, many times it's easier to go back to the old and make believe this really isn't happening because we're scared. And being scared is normal. Transition and change is never easy. It's a process we have to go through, but we will realize it We're going through it, whether we don't think we're going through it or not. Because when you're in denial, you don't even know you're going through it, which is starting the process. Eventually, you'll get to the stage of anger. You'll get angry. And so many of us don't know what it means to use anger in a proper way. See, anger is a healthy emotion if it's processed and used properly. If it's suppressed, it becomes depression and tears you apart on the inside. And that's why it's so important as we go through grieving and go through anything in life, we can't do it alone. We can try because we think we have this thing called willpower. That's why I use the analogy of the seat on a rock. The rock is up here. It's called un capitoso in Italian, brickhead. We always got to do it our way. Try to control it. It doesn't work. And yet, what do? We're human beings. We have to try it until we finally are ready to realize the fact we need help. And then we get angry. We get angry. Did you ever notice something? It's okay to get angry at somebody close to you that dies. Even though you might say things like, well, they're better off, they were suffering, all those cliches we say. But deep down inside, I'm angry at you for leaving me. It's okay to feel that anger because you just lost something. And many of us have a tendency to get angry at everything but the thing we're angry at. We get angry at God. We get angry at society. We get angry at everything. The bottom line is you have to be able to feel that anger and process that anger. That's why we need people in our life. We need support systems, things to help us through this process. We can't do it alone. Nobody can. We need each other. It's part of the journey of life. And grieving is a big part of it. Take all different areas of life, even in relationships. So many times we get crazy in relationships, and when they don't work, we get even crazier. And yet somebody can even say this, God, I'm glad I'm out of that relationship. It was terrible. And yet deep down inside, I'm angry because it didn't work. I invested time in this. I invested efforts in this, and it's not working. I get frustrated. I get angry over it. And so many times in life, that process of change, things changing, we can go into a depression, go into things in life. But then what do? We're human beings. We start bargaining. We try to figure it out. Here comes the insanity. We try to figure it out. If only I had done this, if only I had done that, if only I had gone here, if only I started this 20 years ago. People tell me this all the time. How come I'm dealing with this stuff now? I should have dealt with it 25 years ago. You weren't ready 25 years ago. We deal with things when we're ready to deal with them, and only when we're ready. That's part of the process. Even the 12 steps teach us that. Everything in life is this process, gentle, a little bit at a time, moving, learning, discovering. And sometimes we have to debate. And I love the debating society. I'm going to figure this thing out. I'm going to control it. I'm going to why did it happen? It wasn't supposed to happen, but it happened. Therefore, I have to come to an acceptance. But nobody just comes to an acceptance, believe me. Believe me. We fight, we battle, we struggle, we go back to more denial, go back to more anger, more frustration. We look for things here and there. We look for some kind of magic, and there is no magic. You know, I do have a magic wand. If anybody wants magic, I bought it in a dollar store. If you want me to, I'll wave it over your head. Nothing will happen. Things will only happen when you're willing to do the work. You're willing to make the sacrifices. You're willing to do what you have to do. You're willing to rechange the script that's going on in your head. And that's what grieving really is all about. See, what are we scared of? We're scared of sadness. Go back to the 4 areas of life. Physically, Your body keeps changing. It's not going to stay the same. Look what happens so many times. We have what we call things called the midlife crisis. The 40s, the 50s, the 30s, whatever you want to call them. I call them every decade we have a crisis. I'm getting older. I'm going to try to go back and be 20 again. Good luck, by the way. I'm going to go back and try to be something I'm not. I'm going to try to bring it back again. If only I can make myself look like I'm 20 years old. Well, we do all that crazy stuff that we do. Isn't it great to be human? I love it. I love being a human being. But we keep trying this and we try that and we try the other thing. We try the magic cure. My wife and I were talking about that tonight. I look at these things that they advertise, if you take these particular powders, you will have high energy. You will be able to flow through life and do all this stuff. But again, it's not real. But yet, what do? We look for those magic things. We always do. I'm as bad as anybody else. My wife will tell you. Every time I see something on Facebook, I want to check it out. Now I find out, what am I doing? It's crazy. The bottom line is, we're all going to go through changes. So physically, your body's going to change. You know the old saying, you come into the world in diapers, you go out in diapers. And when you're going out, they're bigger than the ones when you came in. But it's all part of the process we go through in life. And so we have to be able to accept the fact of where we are. But see, again, acceptance is such a spiritual word, and yet such a scary word. Even when it comes to our human body, it is what it is. We try to make it into something it's not and make ourselves crazy and nuts. You have to be able to be open to the process, open to life. Let the process happen. And yet it's hard for us to do that. Why? We're scared of sadness. We're scared of letting go. We're scared of change. And by the way, all these things are normal. To feel all these things and go through all these things. Grief is part of life. You're going to realize that physically. You're going to realize it emotionally. You're going to realize it in life that, you're going to go through losses. Things change. I look at my own life and I realize the fact that I went through this in the priesthood. Isn't it amazing some of the stuff that we do? I knew intellectually, here's that damn intellect again, the ego. I knew intellectually I wanted to leave the priesthood 10 years before I left it. But it took me 10 years of fighting, battling, trying to figure it out, trying to find a way, try to find a door, try to go here, to make myself crazy and make myself half nuts. And I did some pretty nutty things during that time too. If it wasn't for the rooms of recovery, if it wasn't for people that loved me and cared about me and helped me through that process, I never would able to make those decisions. And it probably was one of the healthiest decisions I made in my life. But it took a long time for me to make it. Because again, I try to analyze it, try to figure it out. We all try to do this stuff. It's normal. So grieving is part of the process of life. Recently when I was the EAP counselor for the Philadelphia Water Department in the city, and one of the programs I ran was a program called What's Next? And what it really was a program for guys and gals in the program getting ready to retire. And the purpose of the workshop was, what are you going to do after you retire? Because some of the people are retiring at 55, 58. Some of them are being forced to retire and given a package to get them out of there. So it was interesting. Some of these people were all excited to retire. But then a lot of times people will call me up and say, I've been home now for a week. I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm depressed. My life is changing. See, again, we have a hard time adjusting because I'm grieving the loss. It was something that was very important to me. And now it's come to an end. So I'm watching something die, or something new can be born. We experience this many times. I'll walk around the memorial wall at Starting Point of people that have left us early. through many different ways. We feel sadness over that. We also realize the fact that so many of them basically just were scared to death to have to face this process and go through it and realize how important this process is. And so, yes, grieving is part of life. And whether you like it or not, you're grieving. Because so many of us are scared of change. Yet change is so beautiful and so fantastic. And yet at the same time, it's scary as hell. I never thought I'd be able to say that in my life, that something was beautiful, wonderful, and great, and scary as hell. Transition and change, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Look at a concept of what our belief in a higher power is, our belief in ourselves. I never understood spirituality. Remember a doctor in the hospital saying to me one time when I was there, he said, "Vince, you're spiritually dead. You have no idea who you are." I thought he was nuts. I was a priest. What do you mean I don't know who I am? How can I be spiritually dead if I'm a priest? Well, he said, "You're a shell. There's no inside. Everything for you is outside. Yeah, you function, you perform, you get things done. There's no spirit, no energy inside of you. You got to get in touch with that energy, the real you, the real person within. And that's the part of recovery. That's the part of life. It's being able to look at the fact and realize the fact that we have this beautiful spirit inside of us, this energy inside of us. We're afraid to tap it, to get in touch with it. I'd rather be, doing all this external stuff on the outside, looking for magic, looking for this, looking for that. No, stop looking. Go look in the mirror and see how beautiful you are, how special you are. Look within your own self. See the beauty inside of you. And yet that's work. And yet it's beautiful at the same time. So the 12 steps teach us all this. They're connected to it. Even when it comes to death. I also love the old Italian customs when somebody died in our family. Basically the whole family would gather together, probably in the living room or out on the front porch. And we stay there and we talk about these people like they were alive. It was amazing, telling stories and stuff to this effect. It's all part of grieving. In the hospitals, when somebody dies, they always tell you, they call the family, tell the family to come over and view the body before they move it. Why? Because then it's real, it's concrete. Somebody dies in a plane crash, or they get lost in a boat or something to that effect. There's no body, there's nothing concrete. As a result, then we have a lot of wonderment going on inside of us. I remember a great psychologist saying this one time, and she was talking to a family who was watching the husband die from cancer. And he said they had a 9-year-old daughter, and said, "Listen, when he dies, bring your daughter in to say goodbye to him. Let your daughter actually stand there and talk to him and say goodbye to him." She's only 9 years old. Why should it? No, it's important. She needs to grieve, and grieving's part of it. Let her start the process. Even though it might be sad, it might be painful, it's all part of it. Those feelings emotionally, we got to be able to get in touch with them and not run away from them. And this happens over time. One thing I learned in recovery, everything happens a little bit at a time. It happens gradually. And the grief process is that exactly. There's no time frame on it, although in psychology, there is a time frame. Psychology has a time frame for everything. They normally say the grieving process, they say in psychology, goes anywhere from 18 months up to about 2 years. The normal grieving process. When you lose someone, or when somebody close to you dies, something dramatic happens. That means that it's a time process that happens over a period of time. For some people, it's shorter, because some of us start grieving way before the event actually happens. Some of us start out grieving early. I know in my case, leaving the priesthood, I started my grieving process early. Going through the anger stage, the bargaining stage, all those stages. I was going through them already. I didn't realize it. We don't realize the fact that we go through stuff. We don't even know how that process works as we go through it. It's so important to understand that. It's interesting, part of my journey in life, I was involved for years in putting plays on. Believe it or not, you're looking at somebody here who was an actor at one time. Professionally, I went through a little bit of acting. I built sets for plays and stuff to that effect when I was in the seminary. And one of the things that's interesting, I was involved in a play called Stalag 17. That's an old one, I know. The old timers know that one, but it goes back to the prison camp. And you had Schultz and all those guys and everything else in that prison camp. And the role I had to play was the role of animal. Now, as part of our course, they wanted us to play the role for 2 weeks and then actually act it out on stage for 4 more weeks. And when we were done, they told us it's okay, we can go back to being who we were. You got to be kidding me. I got so used to being an animal, I started to act like animal. I started to enjoy the sloppy clothes, the whole bit, the whole works, and everything else. I almost had to be deprogrammed back into being the person that I was. That's only in 6 weeks. Can you imagine many of us who have invested in some of our craziness and insanity for years? So the process happens, we know. But it will happen, I know it will. You let yourself go through the change, go through the grieving process. And we all got to go through it. But don't do it alone, please. You know why? Because you'll analyze it to death. You make yourself crazy. Don't do it alone. You need help. Get help. Get support. Get people to stick with you, to work you through it, to go in different directions. That's how all this works. It's a beautiful process. The thing I really share a lot about is that stage of sadness. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to say goodbye. I look back at my own life and I realize it took me a long time to get in touch with some of this stuff. My father died when I was 26 years old. I never grieved his death. In fact, ironically, I conducted his funeral. I preached at his funeral. I was, solid, strong, right down the line. I even went over to Antonio Mecca's and helped him dress my father before he brought him over. My mother died. I did the exact same thing. I basically participated in the funeral. What I realize now, I never grieved their deaths until later in my life. I miss my father terribly right now. It's something that I really, really am sad about on the inside. And yet I know I can feel that today. It took me a long time to get in touch with that. And with my mom, too. Sometimes we have to be able to watch that process and go through it with them. It's all part of it. So it's not just about death, but death is a powerful word. The biggest part about grieving is it's death to the old, open up to the new. And realize the fact we're in this constant process of transition. It's wonderful, it's great. And yet, at the same time, it's hard. And so we realize over and over again, all these beautiful lessons and things that we do. We realize the fact that the process, I always tell people, in the beginning, it's a little rough. It goes up and down. Let me go back to addiction just for a couple of minutes. The addicts in here know what I'm talking about. You put drugs down, you put alcohol down, you go through detox, which is horrible. Then you go through what we call the emotional dry drunks, which is really grieving. It's like I'm struggling into this new life. I keep wanting to go back to the old, Why? Because I'm used to the old. Even though it was sick, I was comfortable there. I keep wanting to go back. And yet I need support to help me stay where I am and keep moving forward, keep changing. Because on the other side of every one of us, if we can come to the gift of acceptance, acceptance is such a beautiful spiritual word. It is the word of serenity and the word of peace. Coming to it intellectually is easy. Coming to it inside is something totally different. So one thing I cannot explain, I wish I could. You have to feel it and be in touch with it. And you'll know when it's there. When you come to that point in your life where you say, I'm ready. When you want to do whatever you have to do, and be open to wherever you got to go in the process. Because too many times it takes a while to get there. Especially when we lose someone close to us. The grieving process can take a long time. Sadness is a powerful process. It really is. It's not easy. All we can do is continue the process, continue working through it. And that's one of the reasons why I want to spend a lot of time, especially, I'll spend the whole entire session next week on those first 3 stages. Go into them in a lot of depth. So we can really take an honest look at those first 3 stages: denial, anger, and bargaining. And so many people get stuck in those stages because they just can't allow themselves to grieve. Or we keep waiting for somebody on the outside to take care of it for me. I keep waiting for this magical thing to happen. And realize, no, it doesn't work that way. I never understood this till I got into both OA and EDA, my eating disorder programs. Because one of my sponsors said to me, real recovery is internal, not external. Stop worrying about how you look. Work on the inside, work on the gift of yourself. And if your spirit comes alive, the outside will flow. The inside out. I believe that in every area of life, that the real us is in here. And if we really are able to come to a sense of who we are and open that door and let that spirit out, and everything else flows and goes with it. It comes to relationships, the exact same thing. If we go through loss, we have to learn how to say goodbye. Only then are you ready to say hello. But if you keep looking for something to happen, it's not going to happen. Everything happens. I always use the term, it happens in God's time, not my time. When you're ready, the teacher will come. When you're ready, the doors will open. So in grieving, I have a constant process, allowing myself to be open, even though I don't want to be open. Here's the struggle. I have to allow myself to be open, to keep the process working, even though I don't want to do that. I'd rather go back to my cocoon. I mean, think of the butterfly. You know, the butterfly, when it was basically inside its cocoon, it had to leave and give birth, never become beautiful, but stayed there, it would have died. Well, guess what? Look at us inside our mother's womb. Eventually, we had to get out. I'll lay a 10 to 1 odds. We don't want to get out. Nice and warm in there. We got to get out. And the struggle to get out was tough. But the joy came on the other side. Even when I get out, the doctor slaps me. Great, wonderful, welcome to the world. The bottom line is, it's what life is about. The struggle, working through it, help, guidance. I'm grateful to the steps. I'm grateful to the program for teaching me the value of grieving. And it's nice to be able to finally come to a point where you can let go. But there's still that part of me. I know it. I would love to go out there and referee a basketball game again. But if I do, I'm nuts. You know why? Those young kids are gazelles. I couldn't stay within 2 steps of them. Don't worry about it. But there's that part of me on the inside that says, you can do it. You know, I'll probably get killed in the process, but that's all right. The bottom line, do we do that to ourselves all the time? You know? And so I'm looking for the magic pill, the magic elixir, the magic this. There's no magic. We go through the struggles. We got to go through them. We come to the other side. I talked to a person that was suffering very deeply from many physical ailments. And she said to me, she said, Vince, look, I'm in my 50s. I have all these physical ailments. What am I going to do? I says, well, all you can do is you have to be able to embrace them, build a relationship with them, talk to them. Don't run away from them. They're part of who you are. You know, I never forget, I told you the story before, of a gentleman I met at the Navy Hospital in Philadelphia. Back when I was a young priest, I used to visit the Navy Hospital in Philly. And he had lost both his legs and part of his arms in the war. And he was in a specialized wheelchair. And he had the greatest spirit of anybody I ever met in my life. He was in recovery from his addiction. He was working his program. But he has decided, instead of feeling sorry for himself, he was to go around and try to help others with their lives and give back. That's powerful. But he said to me, Vince, don't worry, I didn't do this overnight, believe me. I didn't get to this stage in my life overnight. I came in here kicking and screaming, angry. I was angry at everybody, at the government, at the world. I was angry at my family. I was angry at God so much it was unbelievable. I even called God names until I finally was able to work through it. And I'm so grateful to the hospital chaplain. I'm so grateful to the people in my ward that stayed with me, that held me, that helped me through this process. But above all, I'm grateful for AA and the recovery program that gave me the gift of a new life. You hear that gratitude? That's what it's really all about. It's beautiful. You know, you go through this process, just unbelievable. You come down to it and see the miracles and the people around you. So grieving is part of life. It's part of the process of life. So I want to spend time on it for the next 2 weeks. First 3 stages next week, the last 2 stages the week after that. And then in that week after that, I'll talk a little bit about the concept of death and dying, which is part of life. Because guess what? Death is not just something physically dying. We go through death at different stages of our life, at different elements of life, at different ages. We go through death and we let go of something that's bad for us, develop something new. Death is a constant process. We have to say goodbye to the old, hello to the new. It's all part of it. I mean, I would love to go back, but I can't go back. I live in Holiday City. I love it. We have a lot of guys here that I should meet them at the gym in the morning. They talk about, if only we could go back the way it was back in the 50s and the 60s and go back to the 30s. And I say to them, you can't. They look at me, oh, it was nice back then. It was nice back then. I said, no, it was what it was back then. It is what it is now. You can't go back. Yesterday's over. Tomorrow's not here. We deal with today and keep the process where it is, or today. And that's the most beautiful thing in life. If we do that, each day you wake up, you say, hey, wow, I'm alive. I'm on this side of the dirt today. Fantastic, isn't it? Gratitude. At nighttime, I'm going to try to make a little bit of change in my life. I remember Richard saying that to me in OA. He used to say, if you grow that much each day, you've made progress. That's enough. Of course, a little bit at a time sticks with you. Too much, no good. It all comes together. So I hope you understand the overview of the grieving process. As I said, we'll continue it for the next 2 weeks. And then the last week, I'm asking Pat Opes, who's our grief counselor, to come in and do a closing session on grief to bring this whole thing to a conclusion. So the month of February is always the month that we pray very deeply to deal with our grief, our loss. We also spend time remembering those who have gone before us. So let us pray. I asked Loretta to put the memorial in so we can say our prayers with that. Can you get it, Loretta? She's trying. Okay, we'll just pray. Here it goes. Let us pray. God, we come before you tonight. Come before you in this very sacred and beautiful place. We come here to say thank you. Thank you for those who have gone before us. Thank you for those who have guided us. Thank you for the gifts you've given to each and every one of us. We ask the God of our understanding. We ask the universe to walk with us and help us on this journey we're on in life. To realize that it's a journey we have to walk. We have to be able to ask for help and guidance as we're on this journey. We remember those who have gone before us. We pray and we ask that they guide us and bless us also as our spirit guides. You constantly try to teach us new things in life. Teach us to realize that each one of us is a miracle, one of your miracles. Teach us to be open to that miracle and to watch it take place a little bit at a time and realize how special and beautiful we are. Give us the strength and give us the courage to be able to be close to you and yet to be able to ask for the help and guidance to help us on this journey. As we grieve, we say goodbye, and yet we say hello to something new and beautiful. So we ask this every day, and we ask for your guidance, your direction, and we ask that we not forget anyone who's been part of our journey and part of our life. We ask this in your name each and every day. Amen.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.